What is up, fellow sickos? I'm Dan Favale. Our 2025-2026 NBA season look-ahead train rolls on. When this goes live, we'll be one-third of the way done. 10 teams will be in the books. We're on to the Charlotte Hornets, which means I have the distinct pleasure to be joined by CBS Sports podcast producer extraordinaire, Mr. Konata Edwards. I love picking his brain every single year, and this team is more fascinating than it was last year, so this is going to be super fun. Konata, how the heck are you doing?
Well, first things first, anything is more fascinating than a 19-win team that was probably the most depressing team to watch outside of maybe Utah. But outside of that, I'm good. Again, I'm enjoying my summer. I'm glad this, the content calendar, I know we're headed towards fall. The minute I see the minute I see all these team previews, I know we're headed towards an actual regular season, and we'll be inundated with nothing but content for the next 9 months.
I want to preface everything we're about to talk about with the Charlotte Hornets have sucked me in again. So you mentioned they were a depressing 19-win team last year. They didn't look like they were going to be that before the season. It was all, will they be healthy? Of course they weren't.
Whoa, hold on. Someone warned you about that last year.
You might have. But I looked at the roster. They just had so many dudes. Now we're at a point again, and I just recorded a podcast a couple days ago, and I sang the Hornets' praises. They have so many dudes again. They're sucking me in, Konata. So this is a team that I don't think they're going to win the championship. I want to make that clear. But this is a team that has sucked me into where I think, I think people might just be too low on them. Or at least the consensus is too low on them.
Define too low. Because I might agree with you.
Didn't the projections just came back from ESPN? They're like, everyone's putting them in. I've seen 12th or 13th. And I just think, is it possible? Sure. I think that there's this is a team that if they get relatively good health, I know we're going to get into all of it. I know what the center rotation is. They indexed heavily on offense. I get it all. This is like a team that I could see more than doubling their win total from last year. Damning with faint praise, maybe, but still.
You have them as a 40-win team.
No. I said I could see it. I haven't done my win projections yet.
But you can see them double it.
38. Yeah, that's not
38 to 4. You are higher on this team than I am right now. You are much higher on this team than I am.
I hope we get an influx of Charlotte Hornets subscribers, and then they'll unsubscribe when they hear my other takes. So let's start here.
Yeah.
Just really quickly with last season. What are you able to take away from it relative to all the injuries that were once again suffered, relative to some of the turnover we've seen now? Mark Williams is no longer on this team. Is there anything you could take away maybe about the way that Charles Lee coaches this team, the things they're doing on the court, anything at all?
Charles Lee, that's the thing. That's the response, because I saw that man coach wins out of teams, and I also saw him pull guys to lose as many games as possible. Like this team, and this is where I kind of see where you're talking about, hey, they can more than double their win total. I can see it because there were a lot of games where they were competitive and they pulled guys. Miles Bridges played a lot of games, didn't finish a lot of games. I think Charles Lee can really coach. I think he can really coach defense. I do think that his offensive schemes rely a little bit too much on the three ball, and I think he got a lot of that from the Budenholzer / Joe Mazzulla school of offense, which when it's on, it's great. When it's not on, it's not great, and it's not fun to watch, and it can be a slog for a lot of these games. So I do think that he can coach, man. I think that's the thing that I came back with, is that he can coach. Everything else, I think it was an inconclusive grade for a lot of this stuff.
Mm-hmm. The offseason, heavily indexing on offense.
Yes.
What do you make of it? How do you feel about it? Was it the kind of the right call here, the direction that they've taken?
I do think we're headed for a very, very interesting thought experiment. Is how good is this offense going to be if we don't have LaMelo Ball? And we're going to say, if LaMelo Ball's not there, can we, before it was LaMelo's out, oh my God, what are we going to do? Now it's LaMelo's out and Colin Sexton can step in, or Trey Mann can step in, or Spencer Dinwiddie. Stop laughing. I hear everybody laughing right now. I understand. Can step in. And or KJ Simpson can step in. There's a lot of these guys to where they just said, if LaMelo gets hurt, we need to find a way to soldier through regardless. And I understand that thought process. I just not like, there are a lot of guards here that feel a little small to me. Like Sexton's there, Trey Mann's there, Nick Smith Jr. for now is there. You have a lot, Spencer Dinwiddie, as I just mentioned. Like, there's a lot of these small guards on this roster where positional size is very important to them, but at the same point, you have a lot of these guards that are way too small to be playing two guard next to LaMelo Ball, or too small to really be a point guard for right now in the NBA.
Do you think that any of the thought process, I mean, the Sexton thing specifically, could that have just been born out of pure opportunity and it wasn't supposed to be telltale of anything they were doing? Because that is still one of the most baffling trades I've ever seen. My favorite conspiracy theory is that the Jazz did it so that the Hornets wouldn't take Ace Bailey.
I don't think they,
if that's all it cost to get the Hornets not to take Ace Bailey, okay, do it. That's why I don't really buy into it. But my point is, that's how confounding that move is from Utah's perspective to me. I get they're trying to clear playing time for the kids, but why are you attaching a pick? Like, what?
Yep. But that's the thing. Like, and I can tell you, we'll get into this, but Kon was the guy. It was Kon, and I think from everything I've heard, it was VJ then Kon. And I believe they really believed in the distance shooting of Kon. But like, Colin Sexton was an opportunity. Like, the one thing that we found out about Jeff Peterson is, if you're going to give him some picks to take on some bad salary, he's likely going to do it. More importantly, if you're going to give him the better player and take a pick, he's absolutely going to do it, despite the fact that you eroded your center depth. I do think that this team, I do think that Jeff Peterson looks at this as, we're going to figure out exactly what we have. We're like the lineup shenanigans, those are done. We are going to try and win as many games as possible, figure out exactly what we have and who we actually can build around. Because I think that this is a team that's going to, by the end of the season, they're going to know exactly what they have. And when they figure that part out, that's when you're going to start seeing guys start moving around.
And while they're sort of on this fact-finding mission about maybe who's keepers, do you think having all these guards, or like, I would call them non-wings, because what's interesting is, like, LaMelo's 6'7", Knueppel's 6'7", Liam McNeeley is 6'7", right? So, but having all of these non-wings, does it speak to how you expect them to play? So my example would be, should we expect to see like Colin Sexton and Trey Mann playing together next year?
I would be shocked if we didn't, quite honestly. Like, I would be shocked if we didn't. I do think that you're going to see a lot more offensive viability. I don't think Kon Knueppel starts. I do think that you're going to see
even with the Josh Green injury.
No, I don't think Kon Knueppel starts. I think you're probably going to see lineup of, and I know this is a later question typically, but we'll just go with it now. Like, I think you're going to see Ball, Sexton, Miller, Bridges, Plumlee to start. I think that's going to be the opening day lineup against Brooklyn. I do believe that this team is going to bring along these guys kind of slowly, and I completely understand why they want to do it, because quite literally, it's just like, you have a lot of youth at the back end and we know that rookies typically don't help. So I do think you're going to see a lot of Trey Mann, Colin Sexton. I do think you're going to see Kon Knueppel come along slowly. Now, granted, this is all training camp dependent. He comes out and he does a PJ Washington from his rookie year, then he may start. This is all very, very subject change, but for right now, I can't see. There's no way I can see, like, Colin Sexton's going to play a lot of minutes, regardless of whether LaMelo Ball's in the lineup or not.
Well, that's interesting. I hadn't given, that's like a lot of, I would have thought like Diabate might have been the starting five, but I mean, you signed Plumlee because that's an offensive decision maker at the big man spot too.
There's that, and I like Moussa Diabate. I think the world of Moussa Diabate. He is one of the bright spots of last year. To me, I think his role is better suited as a bench big. Like,
I would agree with you, but when your alternatives are Mason Plumlee and Ryan Kalkbrenner, I could make a case for Diabate.
You can make a case, but I think the thing is, like, how effective does he become by 2-3 weeks into the season? Especially if his game is basically Kenneth Faried with a little bit of a baguette to him. Like, think about it like that. Like, as much as I love Moussa Diabate is a rotational big. I love him. I don't think that you can legitimately put him out there and actually ask him to be effective as a starter and give him starters minutes. I just wonder if we're headed to a Mason Plumlee, and then when Ryan Kalkbrenner gets up to game speed, then he's the starter. And on top of that, now you have that cheap backup big, and then you can say goodbye to Plumlee in February if you need to.
Do you think that the big man spot is something that they might look to upgrade or address in the middle of the season, or are they not? I know a lot could be, well, if they're so much better than we thought, zooming far out, is that could you see the front office being, it doesn't have to be ultra aggressive, but trying to capitalize on an opportunity to say, hey, like this is someone who actually profiles as a starter in today's NBA, or is that maybe not going to be a priority given where they're at in their competitive window?
I do wonder, like, if there's a Colin Sexton-like trade out there, I think they absolutely do it. If there's a guy that they absolutely say, we can't not have this guy on the roster right now, and we can do it for less than the Miami pick that they own or the Dallas top 2 pick that they own, I think they'll be in the market for it. I don't see it. I think it's more likely we see them shed a lot of talent this year, a lot of players this year, but I don't know. I get this team. I don't have a pulse on really what they're. All I know is that they're going to at least assess everything and everybody, and we are going to see a lot of change come June 2026.
What I find interesting about what you said is that a lot of what they did this offseason was geared towards planning for the minutes that LaMelo Ball is either not on the court or planning around when he's injured and you need to play entire games without him. So you think that was the primary aim rather than, well, let's also try and give LaMelo Ball enough spacing, enough secondary ball handling around him for the first time in at least 3 years? Just when you look at the level of, I know people like to criticize LaMelo Ball's games, and there's certainly things to quibble over, but when you're talking about him taking too many shots, where you're talking about the, assist to usage ratio, you have to me, look at the context of the talent around him. The talent around him was not great. So how much of that, that had to be somewhat of a factor too, right?
If that is absolutely a factor. That was absolutely a factor. Remember, Brandon Miller only played, I think, 20-something games last year.
I had to go back and watch him before doing this because it was so long since I saw or really thought about Brandon Miller, the basketball player. That's how long ago it was.
That was the thing. Brandon Miller only played 20-something games. And the sad part is Brandon Miller in that first game against Houston looked like he was absolutely going to build on his season, and then he hurts himself trying to dunk the ball, ironically, and set him on a path to where he had to go get wrist surgery that ended his season. But I think there's a lot of this to where you got guys with actual solid basketball IQ. The Nick Smith Juniors of the world, they're nice, but it's going to take a little bit more time in the oven, and you don't necessarily have that time when you have LaMelo Ball on a max contract. And, you might have to pay Brandon Miller at the end of next season as well. There's a lot of this to where they're trying to figure this out. It's not only evaluation, but like you said, it's get a lot of secondary IQ, get a lot of guys that can actually play, that actually know what they're doing, and more importantly, can actually hit a jump shot, because a lot of the guys that they played last year couldn't hit water if they fell out the boat.
This is a good place to put this. What do you make of the discussion nationally, even locally sometimes, around LaMelo Ball, the Hornets, the coverage of it, the franchise's view of him, his flaws as a player? I'm asking you to unpack a lot of things there, but what is just your kind of stance on just how it's approached and then what you actually think about this situation?
I think LaMelo Ball, it's one of those, I see both sides, but for the most part, I understand why people say he doesn't play winning set of basketball, but also at the same point, he hasn't, think about the best 2 teammates he's ever had in Charlotte. It's probably a 50% Gordon Hayward and a Terry Rozier that wasn't necessarily trying to blow games. Those are his 2 best teammates ever. Someone's going to say Miles Bridges deserves to be in this conversation. Yes and no. Miles Bridges is a really good player. At the same point, he doesn't do what Gordon Hayward does, and he didn't do what Terry Rozier at that point when he wasn't point shaving tried to do. I think we have to look at the context of the teammates. I think we also have to look at the context of the franchise. Like you start peeling back what happened with this ownership group with Jordan. Like the first thing that Gabe Plotkin and Rick Schnall did was they added a legitimate medical staff. They bolstered the medical room. Like how many of those games did LaMelo lose because they really kind of didn't have the medical staff to take care of them? Like there's a lot of this to where I understand why he plays the way he plays, but at the same point, like you have to understand that a lot of this is like nature and not great nature instead of nurture, and they didn't really nurture him. So there's a lot of this to where I want to see what this looks like as a functional franchise before we start saying, hey, look, he's not necessarily a winning player.
Do you think that I think the organization overall is headed in the right direction, but do you look at and again, the caveat for all of this with the Hornets is always going to be health, but do you think that this is a roster to where you can come out of this season, or even, let's say, going into this season, and we know what we've all identified as, like, what can LaMelo Ball do more of? Like, how can the drives go up, but can they sustain if they do go up? Can the finishing get better? Is he going to be stronger? What does the defense look like? Do you think that this is the roster and the situation where they can come out of this season, assuming he's actually playing, and kind of have more of I don't want to say a final verdict, but a better grasp of who they actually have?
I think the Polaroid gets clearer. I do think that we get a situation where the Polaroid is absolutely so much more clear than last year. And like, I do think that there are pieces here. I do think that when we start talking about this team, like if Brandon Miller plays 60 games, I think we're going to have an idea what he actually is or what he's closer is. Now, granted, I expect a slow start because, again, wrist surgery is nothing to play with, especially when it's your shooting wrist.
Right. That was the big thing, is that having that surgery on a shooting hand makes you wonder what everything's going to look like.
Like, there's a concern I have about that, but I think we're going to figure out what this team looks like when you have smart basketball players around him. And the last time that LaMelo Ball had smart basketball players around him, they won 44 games. So I do think that there's a possibility that this team can pop, but I don't think they're going to be, again, we see the projections, 26 wins or so. I can see a scenario, like, I feel like this team is closer to 30 wins than they are to 20. And I also think a lot of that is because everyone needs to see how clear this Polaroid is before further making decisions and seeing who they have to move and who they have to keep.
Based off the small sample, the injury, have your impressions of Brandon Miller changed at all? And what will you be watching most closely for him in year 3? Aside from the recovery from said wrist surgery.
I think he's a dog. I still think he's a dog. I think the one issue that you might have is that he has lapses on defense, but I think those are going to get drilled out of him. I do think that he's competitive. I do think he's exactly necessary. I am still bullish outside of the wrist surgery. I still believe in this kid, and I'm not one of those that says he needs to have a big year or else. This kid was second in rookie voting for a reason. He was very, very, very excellent. Now, granted, a lot of that was without LaMelo, but I do think that there's a scenario where these two, you start rotating where, again, you cycle one on, you cycle one off. And I do think that there's a possibility that this team really, really starts popping when those two really start playing games. If they play 50 games, I can see a scenario where this team's a lot better than a lot of people expect.
Is there any way, when you're kind of looking at what he's able to do on offense, they put the ball in his hands more to start last year, which I think is important. Turnovers were a little wonky off the live dribble stuff. I think he's going to be fine as a secondary passer. I am wondering, and I don't know if this is more of a strength thing, because you've harped in the past a lot about LaMelo's strength. Should it be a priority, like try to get him moving into the rim more? Just for someone his size, like the rim volume just really isn't there. And if it is a strength thing, like, is there more things they can do for him off the ball, especially if he's going to be in this environment where the floor should be way more open?
I would argue he has to do more, like, because of who else is on the floor. Like, ideally, if you're the Charlotte Hornets, at some point you're starting a lineup of LaMelo Ball, Kon Knueppel, and Brandon Miller at 1, 2, 3. Someone's going to have to be the one to put the pressure on the rim. Unfortunately, we know LaMelo can do it, but struggles with it. We know, again, it's TBD about Kon Knueppel, but everything I've seen about Kon Knueppel is much more of, I'm going to get my spots in the mid-range, and I'm going to bury you there. Brandon Miller's got to be that guy. Like, Brandon Miller has to be that guy. Unless you're telling me it's going to be Miles Bridges in just a strictly rim pressure and roll, it's one of those three guys that got to do it. And I think if there's anyone that can do it better than most, I think it might end up being Brandon Miller.
You already said that you don't necessarily expect him to play a ton out of the gate, but what are just the early impressions of Kon Knueppel? You saw him at Summer League, his fit, yada, yada.
I think he fit, I was one of those that wanted Trey Johnson. I thought Trey Johnson had one of the greatest seasons as a freshman that we've seen in quite a while. After seeing what Kon Knueppel can do, especially with the feel for the game, and if you've watched enough Hornets games to where feel for the game sometimes can lack with the Hornets. A guy with a basketball IQ, a guy that can hit shots, a guy that can credibly defend his position is going to be invaluable. I don't think he starts initially, but I see a scenario where if they're out of it and someone comes calling for Colin Sexton in a deal that they can't say no to, does he start in February and start taking off from there? Yeah, absolutely. I think he's going to get a lot of bench minutes, though. I do think him, Trey Mann, Liam McNeeley, Ryan Kalkbrenner eventually, I think they're going to do a lot of work off that bench. And I think it's going to be very, very fascinating to see how this goes going forward.
And what are your early impressions of Liam McNeeley, who caught my eye at Summer League, did not have a ton of priors on Liam McNeeley beforehand, but there was, had some feel there, better passer than I expected. And he was someone who was a little, maybe it's the size thing, but he held up sturdier on defense as well.
Liam McNeeley is probably one of the most overthought prospects that went into the draft last year. People saw the low numbers and everything else, didn't really look at the context of the UConn team that there was last year. As someone that had to watch that team a lot, they didn't have a point guard. They didn't really have, he was the only NBA talent on that team. As much as I like Alex Karaban is a guy you sign to a two-way contract at best. I say this to say that people overthought it. I think giving him a guy that actually, again, giving him a point guard, letting him do a lot more stuff off ball. And I think there's a chance where he basically goes from, he ends up being a 3-4 hybrid more than a 2-3 hybrid. I think there's potential for that to be something off the bench. But I think he's absolutely an NBA player, and it didn't make any sense for him to drop all the way to 29.
I do think we're going to end up looking back at that pick, and I don't know if it'll be Desmond Bane levels of insane, dropping all the way to 30, but that seems like it's going to be a good value pick at number 29. Go ahead, if you're going to say something.
I was going to, but again, Dan, I saw this kid put the fear of God, him and Solo Ball put the fear of God in Florida, in Raleigh. That kid can absolutely play. I don't understand it. I think a lot of people overthought this, and I think they let a lot of workouts, because I heard about how he didn't necessarily work out the greatest, but I think a lot of people didn't look at the context of that film and figure, if we just get this kid at point guard, he'll be just fine.
Well, you did mention that you eventually see him, Kon Knueppel, all playing a bunch of minutes off the bench. How does this all shake out? You're Charles Lee. How's it work? Because you have Colin Sexton right now. You mentioned Spencer Dinwiddie. If they still want to give KJ Simpson run, Josh Green when he's healthy, if you want defense, is he still your best perimeter defender? Yeah, probably.
By
he's
default,
the guy.
Yes, by default.
So how does that all shake out, or is it that's not this is a team, you mentioned it, that they're going to shed talent, but that's what we need to wait for to see a Knueppel, to see a McNeeley get large swaths of playing time when this team's at full strength?
I kind of wonder what this is going to look like in October. I'm fascinated to see what this looks like in October. Because, again, we haven't even talked about Grant Williams yet. And Grant Williams, if you start looking at the games he played compared to the games he didn't play, Like, this team that looked like it was going to win closer to 30 games than 20 changed completely once he left the lineup and tore up his knee. I don't expect him back anytime soon, but every report I've heard is that this kid, that he's ready to go. So I don't know, like, it's fascinating to me because I do see a lot of the veterans getting the benefit of the doubt initially. And if we get to games and then we get to the point of, oh my God, we have to play Kon Knueppel more. Oh my God, we got to play Liam McNeeley more. Like, oh my God, we got to play Ryan Kalkbrenner more. I can see that happening sooner rather than later. But also at the same point, when you start seeing the schedule and how it unfolds initially, I'm not sure you can afford to play those rookies just that early. Again, I'm not sure you can afford to play the rookies that early.
Not a rookie anymore, but how are you feeling? It's redraft season. He's not getting a lot of love during redraft season. Where are you at with Tidjane Salaun?
I'm still high on him. I think we forget, one, he was the youngest kid in the draft last year. And the thing that I keep coming back to is he was drafted because you had a lot of guys. His drafting was an indictment on the roster that Jeff Peterson thought he had a lot of soft guys that didn't want to grind. And I keep coming back to, I'm still very, very high on that kid. He continues to work. He continues to grind. It doesn't matter. He just keeps going. And effort is a skill, man. And as much as we say, hey, there's no effort, there's no this, there's no that, yada, 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 like, you can't tell me that kid is not going to at least be a rotation guy. I'm still high on him. And granted, there are going to be people that said you could have drafted Klingon. Yeah, but again, the foot thing scared me. Buzelis, I understand, but the guys that they could have drafted instead of Tidjane, I'm not sure I have, how would I put it, like the biggest, I don't have buyer's remorse on those as much as many people do. How
do you think he factors in this season when you have, I mean, we talked about like the perimeter rotation, but you have Miles Bridges, Grant Williams once he's healthy. Like, where does he sort of factor into all that? Does it not really having a ton of centers that you're married to on the roster help out there at all, or?
I think that helps out with Grant Williams. I think you're going to see a lot of backup for Tidjane as long as Grant Williams isn't healthy. I do wonder about what this all is going to look like I do wonder what this is going to look like because I'm fascinated because there's a lot of guys that can compete for a lot of different spots. But at the same point, I'm just like, this kid is going to do something because of his perimeter shooting. I think his perimeter shooting is going to get better. I do think that you're going to start seeing proof of concept with him to where you're going to see, like, okay, I see the vision of what he can be. I don't think he was ever going to be Giannis, but if he ends up being an Ersan Ilyasova or a Nikola Mirotic type guy, I can see that. A guy that hustles his threes and defends at a decent level. Like, I can see that happening and to the point where, hey, that ends up being a great pick down the line.
I think it's TBD to call him I get, like, I don't know how everyone approaches redrafts. Are you picking for the long term? Are you ranking them right now? Because, of course, he's not going to, like, come off too well there. But I will say I probably was more encouraged, like, later in the year or even just the transition stuff. It seemed like if the ball was in his hands, he was playing a little more under control. Mm-hmm. And I tend to throw efficiency. I go off vibes and eye test for the first 2 years of a player's career, sometimes even 3. He might be one of those players where it's like, hopefully the efficiency will line up with it, but I didn't come away thinking that he's like definitely going to be a bust. But I've taken him number 6 as of right now. Like, objectively, it's tough to say. You could frame it the way you did, where it's, well, how high are you on Buzelis and Klingon or a Zach Edey? If you're not high, I mean, the Zach Edey with the ankle issues, he's had like 8 of them in the past year. So I think it's independent of the redraft. The discussion I think is certainly worth having, but it's not as cut and dry as I think people have made it. Not in that draft.
Not in that draft. And again, I would add, if you've paid attention to the Hornets in any little bit for the last couple of years, do you want to tell me that the Hornets drafting an injury-prone center or 2 of them is a really, really good idea? Because if so, I need you to explain it to me like I'm 5.
It's only a good idea had they done it and then traded a first round pick to get Robert Williams III. That's when it would have been a good idea. You got to load up on the injury prone centers.
Exactly.
Like you lean into it.
Like exactly. If you're gonna go do that, you might as well just go collect the whole set. You might as well just trade it for DeAndre Ayton at that point, and then send him off to LA in some failed deal as well. You know.
Are there any you have any strong thoughts on Ryan Kalkbrenner, KJ Simpson, like any of the other younger guys on this roster?
Kalkbrenner's going to be a factor later in this year. I do think Ryan Kalkbrenner we're not talking about enough for right now because again, I think he's going to be on the Mark Williams plan of we're going to get you up to speed in Greensboro. Like depending on the health of Grant Williams, which I hate to keep saying because again, someone can play a drinking game off of this, but depending on the health of Grant Williams at this point, if you tell me that it's Grant Williams, it's Grant Williams. Your center rotation is Mason Plumlee, Moussa Diabate, Grant Williams as your third emergency center. Like if you told me that it's those 3, and then you let Kalkbrenner get seasoning in Greensboro and get adjusted to the speed, because defensively, I think he's going to be ready sooner rather than later. It's offensively and strength-wise and keeping people off the glass where I have concerns for him. I do think that this is a kid that, as we talked about before, I think a lot of people overthought it with Ryan Kalkbrenner, and I do think he's an NBA center. It's just a matter of, is he going to be there? Is he going to get there this year, or is he going to get there closer to next year? And my money's on closer to next year.
You kind of said something. I mean, like, people talk a lot about the lack of proven centers, let's say, on this roster, but I'm just like, how is this team, you mentioned like Kalkbrenner keeping people off the glass, like how is this team supposed to consistently rebound, especially if you're talking about having Grant Williams slide up to the 5?
Prayer. That's it. Prayer. That's it. Let's be real. Like that was my thing. Like I like Mason Plumlee. Mason Plumlee should not be your starting center in 2025. He should be a nice bench option. Remember, Nick Richards, former Charlotte Hornet, came in immediately and became the starting center over who? Mason Plumlee. There was a reason for that. So I do think that the Hornets were just so disenchanted is the word I would use with the entire center room last year that everybody except Moussa Diabate had to go. And I completely understand why.
And the other thing, too, is their defense in general. I think everyone's impression is they've leaned so far into offense that the defense is going to be an abject disaster. I think there's a chance for it to happen, again, just when you look at the personnel, but I think you could argue for a good chunk of last season, or at least schematically with some of the things they did, they punched above their weight with Charles Lee. And I think you could really see it. You watch this team way more than I do, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. When you look at the activity, like the deliberateness that can go into dissuading or limiting shots around the basket, like that was a material change for them. There is no one who finished the season on that roster, aside from maybe Mark Williams, where you look at and said, yeah, you know what, it would make sense that they were able to do that.
Again, that's Charles Lee's thing. Like Charles Lee will scheme up some defense. I'm not worried about the perimeter defense as much. I'm worried about what's going to happen when they get to the rim. I'm not even worried about them creating stops. I'm much more worried about the rebounding. That's the only thing I ever really worry about with this team going forward because, like, we've seen Mason Plumlee get pushed underneath the rim. I've seen Moussa Diabate repeatedly get pushed underneath the rim. But the defense is one of those things where, like, that's non-negotiable with Charles Lee. We've seen it before. We've seen him bench LaMelo off of this stuff. We've seen him bench Brandon Miller. We've seen him bench a lot of guys. If you do not defend, you will not play. And he's got enough guys to where that is a legitimate threat that he can actually carry out if you're not willing to defend this year.
Are you ready to enter the cookie cutter portion of the podcast?
Let's do this.
So looking at their roster, what do you view as their biggest need? We've probably talked about a few of them. If there's any we haven't talked about yet, but we've mentioned rebounding, size,
center.
What do you view?
It's center.
Yeah,
it's center.
That's not really
like that. Like that's the thing. And shout out to James Plowright of BuzzBeat. He brings up the idea of Bam Adebayo as a Hornet center next year, especially since like Miami's not doing very well, and you kind of own an unprotected Miami pick in the future that may end up cashing in and being very like I think that's one of the better assets in the league to have right now. So I would not be surprised if, like, he brings up Bam Adebayo, but I do think center is probably the biggest asset that they need outside of maybe a legitimate wing stopper.
What is there something about this team, whether it's like a strength or a storyline that is flying under the radar relative to how people are talking about them?
The youth. Actually, again, you know what? We forgot to talk about one guy, Sion James. And I think he's going to be fascinating because he's, again, kid out of Duke, probably one of the better perimeter defenders I saw in college last year. I think he's going to have a sneaky chance to get on this roster. And I do think that if he's and if not, he's going to be on the Mark Williams program with Ryan Kalkbrenner about getting seasoning. And he's going to be a part of this team later rather than sooner. But I do think that he's a very fascinating character because if he just does the Lou Dort 3-and-D, guard you up, that's the kind of wing defender that Charles Lee likes. And it gives the Hornets a little bit more flexibility to move a Josh Green or move some more of these guys.
I mean, how do they go about making a roster spot for him at this point? Like that, aren't you entering
He's
territory
on a
beyond
two-way,
just get rid of Nick Smith? Yeah. Okay. So
I
converting
believe he's
him
on
would
a
be
two-way.
tough. Okay.
I believe him and KJ. It's like him, KJ, and Drew Peterson are the 3 two-ways, I believe. Actually, no. I'm sorry. No, there is a roster. No, he's on a roster spot. I'm sorry. They signed Sion James to a regular roster spot. He's not on a two-way. He's actually on a roster spot right now.
So who is like on? I guess it's a Nick Smith Jr. We should pencil him in for like getting the boot from
Him,
here.
Daquan Jeffries. I would assume like him, Daquan Jeffries are absolutely gone. Pat Connaughton's on this roster. I would not expect him to continue to be on this roster. It's very, very interesting because again, they're at like the roster max of 21, I think, right now that they got to shave down at some point. So they have a lot of guys on that team that I don't know how it's going to work, but it's going to be very fascinating to see what happens after that.
Yeah, they have. I thought it was 17. They have 18 guys. They're not all guaranteed, but they have 18 guys under quote unquote contract. One of there's 2 non-guarantees. One of them is Diabate. He's not going anywhere.
No, he's not.
And the other is Daquan Jeffries, so he would be.
He's probably gone. Yeah.
And then I guess it's like after that, does it have to be Nick Smith? Like if you want to keep Kalkbrenner, obviously, yeah, it's got to be Nick Smith.
It's got to be Nick Smith. No, he's gone. Like
I guess ideally it'd be Pat Connaughton, but even he could maybe log some win minutes if you wanted him to.
But isn't he like he's a $10 million expiring? I wouldn't necessarily like get rid of that all that soon. That's the other
for trades that could be useful, especially given their flexibility within trades, like being able to flip him for a player who makes exponentially more.
That's the other thing. The Hornets have a lot of expiring salary. I would not be surprised. If they're the lubricant along with Brooklyn this year in terms of gaining more assets, getting players. Like the war chest is getting kind of full, and they're eventually going to have to make a move with some of these assets that they've acquired. But I would not be surprised if they're in more asset acquisition mode because of that second apron, and we see how deathly afraid all these teams are of the second apron right now.
And they've shown now on numerous occasions, 2 trade deadlines and an offseason, 2 off seasons now, that they are going to be opportunistic and make those types of moves if they're available. So, because that's how they've established part of their war chest. Okay, they got rid of PJ Washington, but like the Terry Rozier trade, that was like a really smart move by them as well.
Shout out to that unprotected pick that's going to keep living on in perpetuity for the next couple of years.
Yeah. So what is it? It's a top 2 protected. 2020. It goes out to 2028. Holy shit! I thought it was 2027. Holy crap!
No, I'm sorry. No, it's lottery protected in 2027. But if the Heat basically are in the lottery in 2027, 2028 is unprotected. I believe those are the conditions on that.
Wow, I thought for some reason it was flopped too. I thought this was the year it was lottery protected. But either way, with the Heat's direction.
And then you have the Mavs pick. You also have the Mavs pick. That's the top 2 protected one, I believe.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, you're right. Yep, you are correct. Lottery protected in 2027, unprotected in 2028. So yeah, there, I is next off season kind of like a you're looking at that as will they try to hit? I don't want to say the turbo button, but the be more aggressive button to maybe cash
Yes.
in some chips. You do think so?
Yes.
Okay.
They have to. They have to because remember, Brandon Miller is extension eligible. So you have like you're going to have to make a decision on that. And we saw what they did with Mark Williams. Like if they don't think you're going to be a part of the future or you're part of the solution, most likely you will not be here. Mark Williams should have told us all of that to start. So I do think that this is going to be very fascinating in the continual reshaping of this roster. Someone's again, it's like that TV show with the season finale. Someone's not going to be here by the time that we get to that point.
You're looking at this roster right now, trying to factor in everything. Who winds up being the 10 most used players by the end of the year? I already filled out my starters, and apparently, according to you, I got two of them wrong, which is why this team is so fun.
All right, again, give me your 10. Give me your 10.
So I mean, so these are my 10, but my starters were LaMelo, Knueppel, Brandon Miller, Miles Bridges, Musa Diabate. Then I have Sexton, Josh Green, Grant Williams, Mason Plumlee, and Tidjane Salaun.
All right. I think 10 most used. I think you need to create. I think you need to probably create a spot for Liam McNeeley somewhere in there. I do think Plumlee is going to get more run than you think. And something about Trey Mann. And I think the Trey Mann is the wild card to all of this. Because if he was truly held out because of just simply because of the back, and they weren't going to play with that on a walk year, which I don't necessarily blame them. Like that's good, that's just good business by his agent. There's a part of me that wonders if Trey Mann doesn't just become just a super piece that they end up either keeping or dealing because the contract is just so easy to move. Which is the other thing is again we talk about easy to move in all these pieces. There are a lot of pieces that are very, very easily movable, including LaMelo, depending on if they want to get to that point, which I don't think they do.
Yeah, even going through it, I didn't even like leaving off a Trey Mann, leaving off I thought Liam McNeeley was easy to leave off just because they had so many dudes, but leaving off the Trey Mann is like that's guttural.
Yeah, but I get it because Trey Mann had a similar season to Brandon Miller. Like, he was there, he was pretty good, and then Christmas came around and he wasn't there anymore. So I completely understand why anybody would have forgotten about him.
Well, those updates too were non-existent for so long, and then all of a sudden he becomes like enters free agency, and it's like, oh, Trey Mann's okay.
Yeah, that whole scenario was very weird because you saw like there were Instagrams of him like practicing and they're ramping up the play and then radio silence. And yeah. Yeah. Like that's the thing. The Hornets move in silence and mystery a lot. They don't let you in unless they really want to let you in and if it's safe to let you in.
Well, so if we say that Trey Mann belongs in that top 10, which I like on it from a talent perspective and like based off the way he's played when he's healthy in Charlotte, it's an easy case to make. Who gets bounced? Is that like at the expense of Kon Knueppel, losing a lot of size there? Is it at the expense of we could say they'll eventually move Colin Sexton and maybe that takes care of it, but you're looking at when I look at the roster of guys, it's all right, or you like who's playing less if everybody's healthy?
So are we factoring in health? Because again, that's the other thing.
I think Josh Green not being healthy to start the season, right? That'll help. But if this team's at full strength, unless we just never expect them to be at full strength,
that's where I would tell you, like,
okay,
you probably need to expect at least one or two rotation guys to be hurt, and that's where the Liam McNeelys come in. I think Josh Green is a sneaky trade candidate too, if I'm honest. I think that's a guy
he should be, but I just don't. I'm not a Josh Green guy. I can't be sold on Josh Green.
No, you know what? You tried to warn me about him last year, and I thought, look, I was looking for any kind of solid defender because, again, you've seen this team, and solid and willing defenders are few and far in between. So I was just looking for a port in the storm, and I came away disappointed despite the fact that the guy shot 40% from three last year.
Just hanging out in the corners, though.
Yeah.
That's what he does.
Still, there's need for that. There's always a need for that. Always a need for that.
This is to some extent matchup dependent. It's honestly an unfair, not just an impossible question, but it's an unfair question to throw at you. What is going to be their most used closing lineup when all said and done? Let's zoom ahead to April. Regular season's over. What's been their most used crunch time lineup at that point?
I would tell you Ball, Sexton, Miller, Bridges, Williams.
Ball, Miller, Sexton, Bridges, Williams. Yeah, I guess I underestimated how much I should be expecting Sexton and LaMelo Ball to play together.
I think that there's that. I do think Knueppel has or either him or Trey Mann. Swap him for Trey Mann.
That'd be fun, line. He's like Trey Mann. Just his aesthetics are more funky. I like watching him a little bit more.
Like that. Like I think that's the closing lineup. I do think there's a spot where Kon Knueppel can sneak his way in, but I don't think that's this year. I do think that they're going to figure out what they have in all of this, and then they're going to start again. This is a very, very fluid evaluation year to where this can either be 24 win. Again, I do think they're going to hit the over, and I think their over is 24.5. They're going to hit that over. This feels
I've already
like
talked myself into can I bump up that line and hit the over?
I feel like that's an easy over at 24.5. I do think that they're going to hit that. I just wonder if the ceiling is 33 to 34 wins for this team.
Is there a funky weirdo lineup you want to see Charles Lee try this year? It should really be all guards, right? Like what's the all guard unit we can come up with?
Honestly, hold on. Funky lineup. Let's see. Mann, Knueppel, McNeeley, Salaun, Kalkbrenner.
Ooh, my God, that's a great one. I don't know that I could beat that. I had Grant Williams, McNeeley, Knueppel, LaMelo Ball, and Trey Mann. I
think the issue with the LaMelo Ball things is I think we're going to see them. Mine is if these guys defend, then we might actually see it. But
I want Sion James in mind now that you sold me on his defense.
Sion James is if they think he's Lou Dort, or they think he's going to be Lou Dort eventually. If he ends up hitting anywhere close to Lou Dort, that is your starter at 2 for a very, very long time. And then we have a very, very uncomfortable conversation about who stays and who goes in that starting rotation between Kon Knueppel and Brandon Miller.
I'll change mine then to Brandon Miller, Sion James, Knueppel, McNeeley, and Grant Williams.
I do like that. That is going to be a grinder. That is going to be a grinder type lineup. I do like that one.
So before I ask you for some predictions, is there anything else about this team that we didn't talk about that you think needs to be hit? Anything you'd like to still get off your chest about the way that they are covered from a national perspective?
Honestly, my whole thing is at this with the Charlotte Hornets, I am of the you're probably right, but they have you're probably wrong about the Hornets, and I say this as a national thing. Most people are probably wrong about the Charlotte Hornets, but they haven't done enough to where they're actually worth defending right now. If they were so bad, intentionally so, now mind you, and they were one of the few teams that didn't get fined $100,000 for shout out to Utah for catching all those fines for lineup manipulation, and everything else that.
They secretly got fined because Walker Kessler was shooting threes. That's what really happened. They're like, okay, that was too egregious for the league.
Yeah, but I think this team hasn't done enough to where I'm actually going to vehemently defend them anymore. They've got it they're embarrassing to be be seen with in public. Even though at this point,
yeah, look at
I'm wearing the Summer League Vegas Championship shirt. Yes, I paid $50 for this. No, I have no shame.
That is the most insane thing that's been discussed the entire. Not the Hornets winning 40 games this year. You paying $50 for a Summer League Championship shirt. Well, I get they took down a dynasty, but come on.
Look, I'm okay with it. Again, this is. Mind you, this is a team that has never been to the Eastern Conference Finals, Dan. They've never won anything of significance. Of course, I'm going to commemorate this. The one time they've won anything, period, not even of significance, won anything. Of course, I'm going to buy it.
I get you bought multiples though for other
Yes,
people. That's
yes.
probably the real insanity.
No, it's not. Again, this is a sickness. I'm viral. I passed on my sickness to other people. Now, granted, technically, one of those was my father, who was a bigger sicko than I, so I had to get it for him. The other person I converted was my wife, so yes, feel bad for her.
So, how many games do you see them winning, and where do you have them stacked up in the rest of the Eastern Conference?
I see like 31 to 33 wins. I think they're going to compete for that 10 slot. I do think I think 31 to 33 wins, and we're talking about a top 3 pick because of the way the lottery works now, where you're better off winning as many games as possible, as humanly possible, and then letting the chips fall where the lottery balls fall where they may. But for some reason, I just see this team winning 30 plus games and giving people something to be excited about.
And that's weird territory to be in, because I think at some point in the season you could look at it and say, when you're a win like, I don't know, 14 or something, is it time to steer out of this? Do you think that this team still has the potential, the front office specifically, would still think in those terms, or if they're on track to actually be a 33, 34, 35 win team, that they'll, if it's happening because some of the young guys are playing, it's not that they're over-indexing on a Miles Bridges and a Mason Plumlee, and those are the guys, and a Colin Sexton that are making the impact. Because I think that's what's tough about their situation, is like 33 might get you in the play-in. It was 39 last year was the 10 seed. And I think to the people, I think some of it's reductive when you're talking about the Hornets, but I do think you could also reasonably look at the East and say, how many teams would you guarantee are worse than Charlotte? And it gets hard after Washington and Brooklyn.
Washington, Brooklyn, and dare I say it, and I feel bad for the people up north, but I feel like Toronto is not that good.
So I strongly disagree, but what I will say is, if you actually got rid of Masai Ujiri for anything that had to do with his philosophical approach to team building, it would, to me, increase the likelihood that this roster has a lot of churn and they lean into that. Now, I think where that logic falls apart a little bit is they've done literally nothing since getting rid of Ujiri. They extended Jakob Poeltl. So if anything, they've doubled down on it. I think I'm pretty high. They were the other team. I had to pick 2 surprises for a podcast I was doing that people are too low on, and I picked the Raptors and the Hornets.
That's the team I wonder. Like, they have so many redundant parts that also can't necessarily stay healthy. Where I'd like to see Brandon Ingram play 60 games. I haven't really seen it in a while. Same thing with RJ Barrett. I'd like to see that. Same thing with Quickly. I would like to see all those pieces come together. They are Hornets North to me, except they actually have a center.
That's a couple of them.
Yeah, that's true. And I do think Colin Murray-Broyles is a very, very, very good player, but he's incredibly redundant for that entire process. And I do wonder what all of that is going to look like. But I feel like it's going to be like Toronto and Charlotte for that 10 spot. But as to the other thing, you're wondering, what happens if they're over-indexing on a Mason Plumlee, if they're over-indexing on a Miles Bridges. I don't think the way this roster is built, even if you are, those are guys that you can probably move anyway.
Well, I guess that was my question, though, is if this team is headed down that path, are they going to lean more into the youth movement either by, okay, Miles Bridges would be the one because of his contract and just the baggage that comes with him, is we're going to shut him down to lean into, or is this a year where it feels like they're going to follow it through just so they have a sample size with as many of the prospective core guys together as possible?
You don't have enough data. That's the thing I keep coming back to, is you don't have enough, the Charlotte Hornets front office does not have nearly enough data to make a decision on anybody. You need to see what this looks like. You have to play this out. And more importantly, at this point, like, if you bomb out in January, who has it actually helped? Like, that's the thing I keep coming back to is, who does this actually help when you start bombing out? Did it help Utah? No. Did it really help Washington? Also no. But again, granted, Washington ended up winning a ton of games on the back end, so they may not necessarily figure into this equation. But San Antonio, it helped, but that's only because, quite literally, Wemby got hurt in February. Like, Luka got traded, and that's what helped Dallas. But it helps you to win as many games as possible because the margins are so thin right now. You're better off figuring out what you have so that no matter where you pick, especially in a draft like this, which is the last real draft in a long time, for at least another year or two. Like, this is the last real draft. I think it helps the Hornets more to know exactly what they have and what they don't have, and to pivot into something actually worth winning. Again, to actually have winning basketball around.
Could I get one other prediction for you for this team?
Okay.
Could be whatever you want.
Liam McNeeley, second rookie all rookie second team, at minimum.
Ooh. They're really going to find playing time for these guys, despite having such a jumbled roster. That's
I think I am a believer in Liam McNeeley. Again, I'm very much a believer in Liam McNeeley. I think he's one of those guys that if you build something sustainable, you have to hit on those kind of guys in the 20s and everything else like that. We've seen it. Again, you mentioned Desmond Bane, Draymond Green, the obvious answer. But there are a lot of these guys that if you hit on late, like, I think that you can end up changing your entire trajectory. And I think he was criminally underdrafted.
I like that one. That's a really good one. I'm going to be tracking this team's minutes pattern more than I kind of thought coming in here. They have so many dudes. That's what I said at the top of this.
They have a ton of dudes. They have a ton of very interesting dudes, and it's just about figuring out where this is. Like, I don't want to say Khan's going to be. I think Khan has a shot at rookie all first team, but I also think there's a chance that he ends up just being a really solid bench contributor this year, and he ends up popping in the following year. But I also wonder, like, there's a lot of this, like you said, it's a roster jumble, and I think a lot of this is going to end up having to get clear. That Polaroid's going to end up having to get clear probably in October, and we'll find out probably first 2 weeks of the season exactly what this is.
Konata, this was a blast, as it
Absolutely.
is every single year. Are you able just to tell our listeners where they could find you on the social machines and what you got going on this season?
I'm still barely on Twitter at Not of the Scribe. Barely. But I'm also on Blue Sky. I believe that, it's Not of the Scribe at Blue Sky on Blue Sky as well. And if you want to catch any of my work and follow me on the draft stuff that we do and college basketball stuff, check the CBS College Basketball YouTube channel.
Thank you so much for all your time, as always. As you know by now, I'll be pestering you again in the future. And until next time, I leave everybody with a shout-out to the one, the only, former Hornet, Mr. Frank Ntilikina.